All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Chasing Larger Sports Stories podcast. You have your hosts, Chase Steffes and Derek Larger, right over here. This is going to be a very interesting show because we are going to start off by talking about teams that made a big leap this year and shocked us to start. And Derek, I've been saying all along, especially at the beginning of the year, you can go back to some of the previous videos that we had. I was talking really high about the Jets and how good their team was going to be and how good they were going to be. And when we had the AFC playoff picture in mind, I said that there could be a wild card team in there, and that could be the New York Jets at the seventh seed. Now, you looked at me like I was crazy. Everybody else looked at me like I was crazy. But right now, they are in second place in their division. They have won three straight games in a row. And Zach Wilson is playing better than what everybody expected. And I said that he was going to be the deciding factor in how well the Jets played this year. Right now, they are 4-2, and they're going in to play. I think the Jags this week, but I'm not 100%
I'm
sure.
gonna take a look at that real quick.
But either way, they are
Nets
going.
are playing the Broncos next week.
They're playing the Broncos, which that could be a very winnable game for them, especially with the way that the Broncos have been playing. So that'll put them in second place at 5-2 if they end up pulling out that win, right behind the Buffalo Bills. And Derek, what are your thoughts on the New York Jets? Are you shocked with how well that they are playing?
I definitely can't say that I'm entirely shocked by who they've been playing recently. You and I both specifically said that we thought this would be the upset, right? I mean, this is them playing against a Green Bay team that hasn't figured it out all season yet. But I mean, it is very nice to see that the Jets, I don't think anyone expected the Jets to be 4-2 for the first 6 weeks. I think that's a very impressive thing. And like you said, when Zach, I will tell you what I'm most surprised at. And this is something that you impressed me with, you saying that this guy was going to be ready. I did not think Zach Wilson was going to come out immediately after his injury and start playing as efficiently as he is right now. Like, they're not asking Zach Wilson to do a whole lot right now because the rest of the team is picking it up for him. They're running the ball efficiently. Their defense is playing great. Special teams did fantastic against Green Bay. I mean, he hasn't had to do a whole lot. The rest of the team is playing very, very well. Robert Saleh said that this culture inside this locker room is different now. And you can see it. The whole team is playing well. And once Zach Wilson starts getting even more comfortable, the Jets can really start doing some damage. I mean, I am very shocked that the Jets are 4-2. And, they beat, like you said, have won 3 in a row now. They beat the Dolphins 2 weeks ago, even with the third string quarterback. I mean, they stomped them in that game. And then Green Bay, I mean, they did not allow Green Bay to do anything last week. And I mean, they've definitely won in a landslide. It really is impressive to see the Jets doing what they're doing right now as a cohesive unit, playing as well as they are.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you've got guys like Sauce Gardner, who has solidified himself as a top 10 quarterback or cornerback right now in this league. And, his stats through the first 6 weeks have shown that he is a lockdown corner. Teams are not throwing his direction very often, and he has shut down some of the best guys on people's teams. So it's very interesting to see where the Jets are going to go from here. But defensively, Joe Douglas has put a good defensive roster together. He's put a good offensive roster together. And like we said, Zach Wilson is starting to get more and more comfortable with this. They're not asking him to throw 30 to 40 passes a game. But if they have to, maybe he'll be comfortable now, like going forward, that he'll be able to do that. And like he's putting together the big plays, looking at his reads, looking off players, going to his checkdowns. He's doing what he needs to do to help them win the game. And I think that if the Jets keep playing the way that they are and Breece Hall keeps running out of his mind, I think the Jets are going to beat the Broncos this week. And we'll get into that with the video tomorrow on like the teams that we're going to pick for the week. But I think that they have a chance to go 5-2 after this next week. And it's going to be very interesting to see how they do the rest of the year and if they're going to be in that playoff picture. Another team I want to talk about is the other New York team, the New York Giants. So they do not have a true solid number one weapon. Okay. You can
Mhm.
consider Saquon Barkley a weapon if you want, but I'm talking about a true number one wide receiver. They don't have that, but yet they are 5-1, Derek, and they're winning games. They're a scrappy bunch of people. Wink Martindale, the former Ravens defensive coordinator, who, mind you, I have talked to several Ravens fans. They were pissed that they got rid of him and they kept the offensive coordinator. And Wink Martindale made the Ravens regret it this past weekend. What is your thoughts on the New York Giants? And do you think that it's all because of Brian Daboll?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a huge factor in that Daboll is the new coach and that this team has a new identity. I mean, I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that Saquon Barkley is back to being Saquon Barkley. I mean, it is that Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the NFL at this moment in time through 6 weeks.
Second best, but yeah.
No, yeah, whatever. You and I know. Listen, Chubb is second for me. Okay, he's still second, still holding that ground strong. But I mean, Saquon is just showing you, like you said it, like this team doesn't have a number one target outside of Saquon. They don't have anyone. So it's insane that this offense is continuing to put up points the way that they are, in spite of the fact that they have no real receiving threats. Kenny Golladay, who was brought in and was supposed to be the next great target for the Giants, he hasn't even done anything since coming to the Giants. He's done nothing. And the fact that he's just taken the back burner is just insane. And it really is showing you that the Giants are able to make things work. Now, I will say this. As the season goes along, the Giants are going to struggle with this because offensively, if you cannot expose teams in the passing department, we saw what that did with the Indianapolis Colts last year. They put too much emphasis on running the football, and the passing game struggled. And we were unable to beat teams at the end of the year because we couldn't run the football efficiently, and therefore we started losing games, and the whole team broke down. So hopefully, if the Giants can keep a game plan going for their offense to where their passing attack doesn't get lost in the fact that they have Saquon, then that may not happen as rough with them. They're still going to struggle when the games get harder and playoff intentions are on the line at the end of the year. Games are going to get a lot harder and they might struggle. But right now, man, I mean, they're playing with heart. And it's insane what the Giants are pulling off right now. The most underrated team and the most unexpected team to have the record that they have right now.
Yeah. And they have yet to play the Philadelphia Eagles, and they are second place in their division. And me and you could argue all day long about the Barkley and Chubb debate. That's a debate for a different show. Obviously, I could give you multiple reasons why Chubb is still the best back in the league, but I digress. But yeah, no, I agree with you on the passing game for the Giants. Like, they need to be able to expose teams in the passing game, but their schedule is a cakewalk for the next upcoming 4 games. And, I feel like they're going to rely mostly on Saquon, but we've got the NFL trade deadline by November 1st. I feel like their GM and Brian Daboll are going to put together a package, sending, a couple picks somewhere, or sending like Kenny Golladay and a couple other picks to a different team for a star wide receiver. There's also guys like Will Fuller that's still available in free agency. They might even try to go out and get Odell again. Who the hell knows? Maybe he'll come back to New York, maybe not. That's just a pipe dream. But there's guys out there, there's people on the trade block that we'll talk about here in a little bit that I believe that the Giants could definitely go out and try trading for. And, be prepared for when that happens, because if they get a number one wide receiver or they even pick up 2, this team could be very deadly and a team that we're not expecting to go very far. And a testament to what Brian Daboll has been doing with Daniel Jones. He's making him look like a top 10 QB in the league. Would you disagree?
I definitely think that he's utilizing the offense more efficiently to where Daniel Jones has a more simplified offense. And that's making it to where there's less mistakes being made on behalf of Daniel Jones. Like if they gave them better wide receivers to throw to right now, Daniel Jones would probably be thriving a little more. But I am impressed with the development of Daniel Jones. And I think that's what's different is it feels like this is a quarterback that instead of looking lost like he was before, he looks like he's more in command. And it's not that it's not that anything got better. Like the offensive line has gotten a little better, which definitely helps. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the weapons are still not there. It just seems like there's a confidence factor, and that's where the development comes in. And that's where coaching matters the most, is getting a quarterback, even when he has no real targets, still getting the guy to calm down and make better decisions. That's all coaching.
No, I agree 100%. And you know, I've always been saying, like, you could have the best roster ever assembled in the entire league, but you could go 8-9 because if you don't have the coaching to lead this team to the promised land, you aren't going to go anywhere. I mean, we saw it with Sean Payton last year. 4 starting quarterbacks that man had, 4, and he still went 9-8. That's a testament to how good of a coach Sean Payton actually was. So Brian Daboll's getting the best out of Daniel Jones with the least amount of weapons that he's got. I think the only other quarterback in the league that does not have that good of weapons is Justin Fields. I think that's the only other quarterback in the league that compares with Daniel Jones on not having very many weapons. And honestly, you could say that Daniel Jones has worse because at least he has Darnell Mooney to throw to. Daniel Jones doesn't really have anybody. But like you said, if you give him star wide receivers to throw to, we might be talking about them being undefeated as well and competing with the Eagles as the best team in that division because they lost to the Cowboys by 6 points. It wasn't that far off. And had he had a better wide receiver to throw to, we'd be talking about this differently. Now, a team those are 2 teams that are on the rise. Let's talk about 2 disappointing teams this year. One of them being the Oakland Raiders. We thought coming into this year, with the Raiders finishing 10-7 last year, making it to the playoffs as a wild card team, the future looking promising, and now getting Devontae Adams this offseason, pairing him with Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, and Josh Jacobs. We all thought that Derek Carr would take that next leap, and we all thought that the Raiders would be a force to be reckoned with in this league. And man, were we wrong. They are 1-5 to start the season with and looking horrendous. And they've got currently the 3rd overall pick. What's your thoughts on the Raiders?
Yeah, the Raiders, I mean, it's really odd seeing what's going on with them right now. We had indications that maybe this team could, be potentially in the playoffs. And it looks like their chances of it are going away further and further every single week. I mean, I called it. I said this team could either win the division or they could be the worst team in the division by a long shot. And that's sad because the Broncos are 2-4. The Broncos have looked terrible this year, and you have a better record than the Las Vegas Raiders. So, I mean, what does that tell you? What does that make you? Like if the Denver Broncos have a better record than you, right? So the Raiders, I think a lot of it just has to come down to coaching because, I mean, that offense should not be playing as bad as it is. This team should not be playing as bad as it is. They keep losing games at the end of games. They're not a very disciplined team. They're not a very tight-knit team, and it shows a lack of leadership when you continue to lose games at the end of games as consistently as they do. So, I mean, this is more than just a player issue. I mean, the problem that you have with this organization is who's coaching it and who's running it. That's the biggest issue that you have right now. They got all the talent in the world. We keep raving about it all the time. They got a top 15 quarterback in the league. They got a top 3 wide receiver in the league, if you really break it down. They
top 3 tight end.
Yeah. And then you got a top 3 tight end. You got a top 15 running back, who, by the way, is still playing insanely great. Despite everything going on. You've got 2 all-pro guys on your defensive line, and yet somehow, some way, this team can't win games. So at the end of the day, it's all about coaching. This team is not built well from the management standpoint to the coaching aspect.
No, you're absolutely right. And why they chose to get rid of Rich Bisaccia is beyond me, because he had that team playing together. They loved playing for that man, but Mark Davis wants to be the next Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. He wanted to bring in an offensive guy who was doing so well with everybody else to come in and take this offense to the next level, especially with the way Davante was playing. But that's not what you need. What you need is you need a guy that's going to be a leader with these people. You need somebody that's going to come in, not expect a whole lot out of your team, and have them just go in and playing, or like playing for fun, and don't expect anything. Right now, like you said, Josh Jacobs is a top 15 running back in the league, and he's number 3 in the league right now in total yards. Number 3. He's 150 yards behind Chubb and Barkley, but he's still, they're running the ball with him efficiently, and they should easily have 2 extra wins. They blew a last-second lead in the Cardinals game, and then they had that one play with Davante in the Raiders-Chiefs game that, caused them not to score, and they lost 30-29 because of it. So realistically, the Raiders should be 3-2, but they are 1-5. Or sorry, they should be 3-3, but they're 1-5 because of this. And this is a testament to their coaching and a testament to how they are. So it's very, very, troubling when it comes to that. So there's also another team I want to talk about that's been very disappointing and very underwhelming. And you can make the excuse to that, like his weapons and his players around him are injured. But we have seen this guy time and time again do far more with far less than what he has. And that we could talk about the Broncos and what we expected, but that we'll save that for a different time. The team I want to talk about is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Going into this year, everybody expected them to, continue on with their trend now that Tom Brady announced that he's coming back out of retirement. Everybody expected them to take the next step forward. And yes, he's had injuries to Mike Evans. He's had injuries to Chris Godwin. He's, not had his star center and everything since the beginning of the year. But this is Tom Brady, who's done it with guys like Chris Hogan and Danny Amendola, for crying out loud. He has done it with far less weapons in this league before. And if he's as good as everybody says he is, why isn't he doing it now? That's the key problem. They're facing a lot of controversy with the coaching staff. They're facing a lot of controversy with the players, and they're just not playing and clicking on all cylinders. Do we think that the Bucs are going to go anywhere this year, Derek?
Well, I mean, I kind of mentioned it to you, and this is kind of one of those things where we can mince a topic with what we've got already. And, Todd Bowles was asked about them when they lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're saying that, the Bucs are playing somewhat like they're in fantasy land right now, trying to relive the idea that from 2020 when they won that Super Bowl, that they're still on a Super Bowl high in a way. They think, oh, we still got Tom Brady. We still got this. We still got that. Like, we could still make a run. They're not playing like a team that should win the Super Bowl right now. I mean, their last 3 games have been so abysmal. I'm amazed that this team still has a plus point differential when it comes to it, because this last few weeks, they lost to the Green Bay Packers, by the way. You lost to the Green Bay Packers, who just lost to the Giants and the Jets in back-to-back weeks and had 2 of the absolute worst. Actually, the Green Bay Packers offensive-wise has not looked good since week 2. And even then, it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
So that they're losing to that. And then they lost to the Chiefs. I'll give you that. It's the Chiefs, and they played them tough. Even though they were getting beat really quick, really early, they were still finding a way to hang in the games. They beat the Falcons, which they shouldn't have. The Falcons should have won that game because Tom Brady got the greatest roughing the passer call that we've ever seen in our lives, and it ruined the Falcons' chances of coming back and winning that game, which the Falcons got stolen from them. and then they lose this last week to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who at that going into that week was the worst team in the NFL record-wise. The worst team in the NFL and the worst team in the NFL in the point differential category, and you lose to them. Like, you're right. Like, this is Tom Brady that we're talking about here. Maybe it is time that we reconsider that Tom Brady's actually a good quarterback now. Because, listen, there's been a lot of off-season drama when it comes to Tom Brady. We've heard a lot about the personal situation between him and his family for this decision to come back, is what we presume. And, this team doesn't have the same coaching that it does as before. It doesn't have the same talent offensively that it had before. This offensive line can't protect them right now. They can't pass the ball. And defensively, they're trying everything they can. I mean, this team is not the same Tampa Bay team. And even if they still make it to the playoffs, I truly don't think that there's any reason to fear Tampa Bay right now, because even though it's Tom Brady, they're not looking good right now. I mean, offensively, they just look in shambles, and they can't stay healthy long enough to do it either. So I don't think this is a team we need to worry about right now.
Side note right now, I let people in my group chat know that we're live streaming. Is this live streaming to YouTube right now?
Wait, what's up?
Said I let people in my group chat know that we're streaming. Are we live streaming on YouTube?
Yeah,
right
now? We're live right now.
Okay, good. But yeah, no, with Tom Brady and the Bucs, man, I think it was a extreme disappointment with how they've been playing, and the fact that they could not beat the Steelers. The stat coming into this that they were 0-7 without TJ Watt on the field, and you put up 18 measly points when this Bucs team a couple years ago was putting up like 25 to 30 points a game or more on teams. Yeah, granted, like we said, players are injured, but we've seen Tom Brady do far more with far less talent around him. And the fact that he's not putting teams away and they're not competing, I honestly think it's because of Todd Bowles. Now, people call me crazy if you want. Ever since Bruce Arians has stepped down from being the head coach of that team has fallen apart, like, drastically. And like you said, with how weak the NFC is and how weak that division is, they are going to make the playoffs. But I think that the teams that are actually going to beat them, I could sit here right now and say that I think that Daniel Jones-led New York Giants could beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they really could. Then you got the Eagles to compete with. You've got the Cowboys that are probably going to squeak in to compete with. The Minnesota Vikings are 5-1 right now. 5-1, Derek. They are leading their division. They are playing great with Kevin O'Connell as their head coach, and that is a team that can make it far in the NFC in the NFC period. Make it to the NFC Championship game maybe, because outside of the Eagles and outside of the way that the Giants are somehow playing, I think the Vikings are the next best team in terms of the way that the roster's put together, in terms of the way that the team is put together, and in terms of the way it's being coached. Now, it's all a matter of what Kirk Cousins can do and lead that team to victory, but I do not see this Bucs team lasting and going the distance with.
Yeah, I don't either.
So, moving on to the next topic, we got the owners have all met together to talk about Dan Snyder's pass. Now, for anybody that does not know about what happened with Daniel Snyder's, he's had a lot of backlash from former people that have worked with him, talking about how he's had sexual assault allegations on him. He has mistreated female employees. He has mistreated employees in general. And he has done a lot of horrible things as the owner for the Washington Commanders. Now, he came out and said and that if these owners got together, that he would hire a lawyer and dig up so much dirt that they've got on all the other owners that they would regret doing what they're doing. Do you think that they are scared of Daniel Snyder's threat, or do you think that he's bluffing?
Oh, I mean, there's been plenty of reports. Now, I mean, obviously ESPN came out and said that that was something that what happened. And, Snyder's legal team came out with a notice yesterday after Irsay came out and said that I have never once done such a thing in my entire life. Like, as if those words mean anything, because, like, of course, anyone who's guilty of something is not going to fess up to it. I mean, they say they have evidence. The owners are going to see the evidence and are going to decide whether or not that he's innocent or he's guilty, one way or the other. But,
what did Jim Irsay say?
Hey, I mean, Jim Irsay came out yesterday and said a bunch of different things. Said that, he says that he feels there is momentum to in the direction that they can use to remove Dan Snyder as an owner. He said that, the way that things are as an owner in this league, the badge that it represents, there's no tolerance for stuff like this that Dan Snyder's been doing in that circle, and that it shouldn't be allowed and it shouldn't be right for someone in that kind of power to be able to do the things that he's been doing. Because this goes beyond just the private investigator BS. I mean, this is everything. Over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been sexual assault issues, sexual misconduct, misbehavior of employees in the building, fraud, a ton of other things that go beyond what Dan Snyder's been accused of now. I mean, there's a long laundry list of things that Dan Snyder has had thrown against him over the last several years. And, this is just another thing that ESPN is putting out. Now, I will give this to Dan Snyder that, I don't trust ESPN either with anything. I mean, this is the same ESPN that threw Rachel Nichols under the bus by wiretapping her room against her will and didn't shut it off, and then used it as a political point to go against her in a racist argument. I mean, that's the same ESPN. So I can't really blame Dan Snyder for wanting to bring out the same thing. But at the end of the day, Jim Irsay, I mean, obviously when we talk about Jim Irsay, Irsay's had his fair share, Chase, of bad times when he was younger. He used to be a drug addict. He was a guy that was not clean, was not a good guy at all. But he's cleaned up his act over the last 20 years. He has really become a staple of what an NFL owner should be in regards to representing themselves, their community, and the sport. He is as good as they come when it comes to genuinely good men that there is. And he said it, like, they asked him, like, does he fear that Dan Snyder would dig something up on him? He said, he can investigate me till the cows come home. It's not going to change my stance on how I feel about him, because everything that's happened with Jim Irsay, it's out in the open already, Chase. There's nothing to dig up from Jim Irsay because everything that everybody knows about him is already out. So there's no reason to worry about it. And Jim Irsay, he doesn't like to speak for other people, but if he's coming out saying that there is a genuine movement of guys that won't come out but are saying they feel the same way about Dan Snyder, I believe it. I believe him that there are a lot of owners that probably feel the same way as Jim Irsay, but Jim Irsay is confident enough to come out and say it because he doesn't have any baggage. Maybe it's true. Maybe Dan Snyder does have some dirt on Goodell and a couple of these other owners, and maybe that's why they don't want to come out and say it. But, I mean, kudos to Jim Irsay for being the one to stand up and say this is not something that should be represented by the league in the NFL right now.
Yeah, like you said, there's been the owners' fair share of bad times they've had. And even the Browns owner, Jimmy Haslam, has been in the spotlight before when it comes to bad things. For those of you that don't know, he is owner of a lot of the Flying J truck stop companies that are in the United States. And he was accused of stealing money from several of the competitors and several of the Flying J truck stops because of the things that he was doing. there. So he's had that under his wraps. Obviously, that's not as bad as what everybody else. But do you think that if we're going to hold Dan Snyder to the high standards like this, do you think that we should do the same thing with Robert Kraft and Jerry Jones from what they've done? I mean, Robert Kraft had a freaking brothel, for crying out loud. And that's a bad look and a bad image as an owner. Do you think that we should kick him out as a Patriots owner?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, if we, it's just weird because, you know, we're getting into legal territory here, and I'm sure you understand it. Is that, you know, evidence that is brought out in an illegal manner is not allowed to be utilized as a criminal offense. Now, I will say this. I mean, the NFL is not a criminal organization. They're allowed to fire and remove people in any way, shape, or form. And, you know, if NFL owners after all this want to say Robert Kraft is next because we found evidence of him, you know, doing shit like that, then I totally agree with you. It might be something that we need to come back to. But obviously, like what Dan Snyder's obviously the big issue going forward. And if, you know, that if it's true that he ends up, you know, did have private investigators and did dig up some dirt on some people, could be a very interesting talk that we're about to walk into. But I think right now, obviously the focus is on Snyder, but you know, if Snyder doesn't have any evidence of anything, then that's not a conversation that we're going to end up having.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see where these investigations go. Obviously, we saw what Stephen Ross did, and we saw the repercussions that he suffered from what he did. Obviously, he tampered with, you know, before the legal tamper period of talking to players. He tampered early with trying to get to recruit Tom Brady to Miami and get him there. He also, you know, was hand in hand with trying to sabotage a lot of other players, you know, reputations. And obviously he got suspended as owner until mid-October. He got his first round draft pick taken away, and, you know, so on and so forth. So with the repercussions that Roger Goodell is insinuating on these guys, they may be next. Robert Kraft, Jerry Jones, Dan Snyder, all of those guys may be in trouble in the next upcoming year or so, and we'll have to wait and see what takes place. Obviously, I don't think things are going to happen to Jerry Jones. He's the owner of the most expensive and well-known franchise in the league with the Dallas Cowboys, but you know, he even came out and said, "You don't want to F with me on this, you will lose." And so it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But moving on to the next topic, we've got the NFL trade deadline coming up on November 1st. And there has already been a lot of players linked to new teams and been linked on the trade block. What are some big names that you could see being moved in the next 2 weeks and being on different teams?
Well, I mean, there's a couple different names that, you know, get brought up. And I think the biggest ones that we've seen is a couple of Bears and Panthers players. One of them being Christian McCaffrey. We've heard that the Bills have had ties to Christian McCaffrey and his agent and things of that nature. So that would be very interesting. And then, of course, I heard just recently that Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith are on the trading block for the Chicago Bears. I mean, there's probably a bunch more names that we're missing here, but, you know, you're talking about Roquan Smith, you're talking about Christian McCaffrey. Of course, Roquan Smith, we heard about the contract issue he was having over the offseason. And then you were talking about, and especially with the direction that Chicago may want to move in, if they can get a bunch of good picks for Roquan Smith, who, by the way, is leading the NFL in combined tackles so far this year. It's one of those situations, or second, actually, behind Zaire Franklin. You know, you want to get as much compensation for that as possible while you have it. And then Christian McCaffrey, who, you know, is a trade commodity because, he would warrant a first and maybe more because of his athletic ability. You could easily get another first and maybe even a third or a second out of the Bills, and the Bills would take that in a heartbeat because that's just another offensive weapon that nobody would be able to stop. There's a bunch of other names. I'm sure you might have a move or two, but Christian McCaffrey and Roquan Smith are the biggest ones that I have heard.
No, like I totally agree with you. Christian McCaffrey, if he goes to the Bills, man, like you can almost guarantee them a Super Bowl for this year because that offense is already stacked and high powered. They just don't have that high powered of a run game. And I'm telling you, like with the way CMC is, the way he plays, and what he brings to the table, that will be the next completed step in launching the Bills to the next level of what they need to be. Now, honestly, like you said, will the Bills give up a first round pick for Christian McCaffrey? Absolutely, they would. Because if it means going to a Super Bowl this year and winning it all, they would gladly give up that first round pick next year and maybe the year after that to ensure that they got Christian McCaffrey for the next 2 to 3 years, and it would be able to help that team out drastically. And another guy that you didn't talk about, Derek, that is on the trade block as well, and that is DJ Moore from the Panthers. He's already expressed that he is not happy with the Panthers organization, his role in the offense, the way that he's been playing. And the Panthers are in a complete rebuild at this moment in time. They have no third-round pick, no fourth-round pick, and I don't think that they have a second-round pick either this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they get in compensation for these players, because if they can get another first for Christian, they're easily going to get another first for DJ because he's still that top, or like one of those top receiver commodities that teams are looking for. And they could easily get if they don't get a first for him, they can easily get 2 seconds and a third, or maybe 2 seconds and a player. Either way, DJ Moore is going to be on the trade block as well. Teams that are going to be looking for wide receiver help, I could see the Bears doing it. I could see the Giants being it. But one team that has been in the mix for DJ Moore as of late has been the Kansas City Chiefs. Mm-hmm. If you pair DJ Moore with Patrick Mahomes, we are going to have a showdown of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship this year. And it's going to be the person that has the ball last is going to win that game. Bottom line, it will be another 13-second game that we will see again this year between those two. And if those two get those two weapons, look out. But we had just talked about earlier in the show how the Giants are 5-1, winning with no offensive weapons other than Saquon Barkley. And they somehow beat the Baltimore Ravens, who many regarded as one of the better teams in the league. Many regarded as Lamar Jackson being a top 5 quarterback, needing to be paid, and so on and so forth. He could be in the MVP race. The Ravens have lost 3 games now. I don't think in a row, but like 3 out of their last 4, and all in close fashion, mind you. And one of them being to the Giants. The fact that the Giants only had Saquon Barkley and they have a bunch of no-name wide receivers. They don't even have Kadarius Toney playing, who was supposed to be one of their better weapons this year. Galladay's not taking off and being the guy that they need. DJ Moore could step into that role, be that number 1 wide receiver, be that plug-and-play guy, and we could see it happening within the next few weeks. But, the Giants aren't one of the teams that are in the mix. I've heard that there's 4 teams that are in the mix for DJ Moore. The Browns, the Chiefs, the Rams, and there was one more. I can't remember who the last one was, but it wasn't the Giants. But yeah, it was the Browns, Chiefs, and Rams were definitely in contention for the way DJ is. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen and where that's going to go. Another guy that I think could be on the trade block is Tyler Lockett with the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, with the way that Seattle's been, Geno Smith's been playing really good. They've got 2 first-round picks this year. I don't see Tyler Lockett being a Seattle Seahawk for much longer because obviously he's reaching the back half of his career. He still could be a good wide receiver threat for somebody that needs it, but like they could get him for cheap. They could get him for like a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick. And I could see, him going to a team and making an immediate impact right away. on somebody else's team. Do you see what defensive players do you see being on the trade block and leaving anytime soon? Other than Roquan Smith and everything.
I haven't really seen a lot of other I haven't seen a lot of other ones. So maybe you have seen a couple that would have been around, but I haven't seen. Just the biggest of news has been, of Christian McCaffrey and some of these Carolina Panthers players and some of these Bears players. But other than that, that's all I've been hearing about.
The only other defensive players that I can think of is Derek Brown, the defensive tackle for the Panthers, and Daron Payne. Daron Payne have also seen linked.
I will say this: the Panthers have come out explicitly and said there is no possible way we're trading him. No way. So that's one body that they said that they would never entertain the idea of trading. So
are you sure it's Derek Brown or is it Brian Burns that they're talking about?
I've heard Derek Brown and Brian Burns.
Okay. And the only other guy that I can really think of defensively that I could see being on the trade block soon would be Daron Payne. Daron Payne has been a defensive tackle that has, had pretty good moments in the league and could be a nice plug and play run stopper for any middle of the pack defense that they need. Honestly, as a Browns fan, I would love to see Daron Payne in the middle of our lineup and love to see him go in there. But there's still some free agent guys out there like Ndamukong Suh. Still a healthy guy, still has a little bit left in the tank. He could come into any organization and be that great run stopper that they need and, lead the team to the promised land. But that's just what we got for the players. Now, Derek, let's get into the big topic on, teams like what your team is looking for and trying to discuss, and that is quarterback prospects for this upcoming draft. Now, obviously, me and you have discussed at length and at nausea who we both see as our top 4 candidates, but we need to pick a 5th candidate that we're going to have, at that 5th spot. And we also want to talk about who we see being a good fit for the Indianapolis Colts and who we think is going to be the first few taken off the board. I'm going to have you go first, and you tell me your top 5 guys and where you think that they're going to end up, and who do you think ultimately will end up with the Colts?
Okay. You want me to start from 5 to 1 or go 1 to 5?
Let's go 1 to 5.
Okay. All right. Well, my number 1 quarterback prospect, no shocker, is CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, from a mechanic standpoint this year, has really, really done a fantastic job of turning himself into a fine quarterback regardless of the situation around him. There's a clear difference how much better he is this year versus last year. And this was kind of the argument that we made, Chase, for Dwayne Haskins. If you remember, Dwayne Haskins had a phenomenal year that year, but the problem that you had with him was it was 1 year. It was 1 year as a quarterback. And I think people have been trying to use the argument of don't ever draft a redshirt sophomore quarterback. The difference is with a lot of those is that that's just one element. Why did all those redshirt sophomore quarterbacks not succeed in the NFL? Was it their play style? Was it their numbers? Was it who was coaching? Was it where they got drafted? All of these things come into play. CJ Stroud last season was amazing, but Haskins, we all knew, should have stayed another year to develop more as a quarterback, but he went and chased the money while he had it. Of course, I understand that. But at the end of the day, he got drafted into a bad situation. He wasn't developed as much. Stroud is in a situation now where he is developed perfectly with this Ohio State team, and he is reading defenses so well now. And what sets him apart, my opinion, from everyone else, and we'll at some point watch film and I'll break this down for you. There have been so many throws that he has made this year where he fits it into such a tight window that I don't think there's any other quarterback in college football that can make some of the throws he's making. There were a couple throws in that Notre Dame game in the first game of the year where he was throwing it to guys that were falling out of bounds. and he was just absolutely dominating and making those plays. And that's what sets him apart, is those NFL type throws where it's the contested ones, the ones that you think, oh my, there's no way that a guy can make that throw, but he did. And that's what's great about it. Oh, this right here.
Yeah.
I'll just say right now, no, I don't think Michigan's overrated. I think they're right where they need to be. I think they definitely deserve to be a top 4 or 5 team. They run the ball better than anyone else in the country. Their defense is just as good as anyone else's in the country. They definitely deserve to be where they're at. Going back to it, I will say they're not as good as Indianapolis, or as Ohio State, but we'll get into that at another time. My second quarterback is going to be Bryce Young at this moment. Bryce Young, I think what sets him apart is his escapability and his ability to just operate their offense. It's phenomenal. He's got great legs, and his accuracy is really freaking good. It's off the charts too. Makes a lot of great NFL throws. That really sets him apart. My number 3. Now, I would say I would put Will Levis at number 3.
Wow.
And I think that most scouts are going to do the same thing. Is that because Will, being in the pro style offense that he is in college already, gives him a step up versus the scheme that they're running right now with Hendon Hooker at Tennessee. And then on top of it, we've mentioned it several times, Chase, that, you know, the talent that Will Levis is playing with right now is so much less than what everybody else is playing with right now, and Hendon Hooker and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud right now. And I think I've seen more NFL quality plays out of Will Levis than what I've seen from Hendon Hooker. Not saying that Hendon Hooker isn't great, and he's phenomenal. He's going to be, I mean, I'm almost at the point where I can go 3A, 3B, and it just kind of is a toss-up for me. But I think I've seen a few more indications that Will Levis will thrive more off of the NFL prospect list than Hendon Hooker off the moment. And that's where I would go with Will Levis there. Hendon Hooker at number 4 for me. Like I said, I can flip those two quickly. Hendon Hooker's got a great arm. He's got phenomenal power, and he has escapability, no question. You just question the age at times, and then you question some of the mechanics of Hooker sometimes bothers me. And then when we go into QB5, there's a couple. I think Cameron Ward from Washington State's on the rise. I think that there's a couple others that you could throw in there. BYU's quarterback is good. I'd say Clemson's quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, is definitely the other one that I would throw in there. He's 6'4", 240 pounds. I mean, the dude is huge. And, I mean, he actually can move for a guy that's that size. And he's got a lot of intangibles that I think really could set him apart with the right system. So that's my 1 through 5.
Yeah, see, mine's a little different just because, you know, looking at how they have, like, I've seen multiple games with these guys. I haven't really seen, like, every single game, like, from start to finish out there. Obviously, there is quite a bit difference between these people, but my number 1 has to be CJ Stroud as well. You know, this guy has been playing out of his mind. He was leading the Heisman, he was leading the Heisman power rankings and the leading candidate for so many weeks. And looking at his stats, he's got 24 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in 6 games, and he's not even playing in every single quarter of these games. And like, he's been taken out in the last 2 quarters of each game for the past, 2 or 3 weeks, Derek?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that he's been taken out of the 3rd and 4th quarter.
I think that he's only played in the 4th quarter, I think, 1 time. And that was in the Notre Dame game. He might have played one drive in the 4th quarter of 1 game, but for the most part, he's been doing all this in 3 quarters of every game.
Yeah, no, and that's what's astronomical about it. The fact that he's been doing that in like 2 to 3 quarters of each game, you can sit there and make the argument the talent that he's playing, or like the talent that he's playing, the schools that are playing are not that good, but like just what he's been able to do on the field has shown that he can make that next leap and that next step. And make that argument all you want that Ohio State quarterbacks don't pan out in the NFL. But like you said, Haskins was not ready to translate to the NFL. He needed to be at least there for one more year to see. Justin Fields was ready to go. It's just we are seeing a situation right now where he is not getting any help from his organization. He's already expressed discomfort and wants to leave Chicago to go somewhere where they're going to better utilize him and everything. And they're not giving him the weapons that he needs to succeed, or the offensive line as well. And the funny thing about it, Derek, I saw an interesting thing of stats for the first 17 games of their careers. Josh Allen and Justin Fields had the same stats, or very, very similar stats. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Justin Fields is the next Josh Allen, but what I'm saying is their stats were pretty much similar, neck and neck. So CJ Stroud had also a 70.6% completion percentage for 1,700 yards. He is by far the quarterback one in this, system. Now, I think that I'm going to go a complete opposite route. I think Hendon Hooker is number 2 on this list over Bryce Young. Bryce Young has missed 2 games and, came back in the game against Tennessee. Obviously, before that, he was struggling a little bit. He struggled in the Texas game, like I said before. Had Quinn Ewers not gone down with an injury that game, Texas beats Alabama and they lose their second game of the season. Now, honestly, you can't blame that on Bryce Young, but I'm saying he didn't do anything to help that team win even more. They won 20-19 against a second-string QB that they were playing. And Quinn Ewers, like I said, was playing out of his freaking mind before he broke his collarbone. So, I think that also with the stats of Bryce Young, he has 186 attempts for 105 completions, 67.2% completion percentage, which is 3% lower than Hendon Hooker's. And he's got 16 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That 3 interceptions is also a thing that, is going to be puzzling. He's also 6 foot tall, which, for a lot of people nowadays, that's really not that big of a deal because you got guys like Kyler Murray who are succeeding being 5'10" in the league. But, I digress with that. But I will say he is probably the most elusive quarterback that we've got on this list in terms of being able to get out of the pocket, making things happen, just improvising in general. He is probably the best one out of these guys that can do that. And my third guy on the list is Bryce Young, because Hendon Hooker has the arm talent. He's got the arm strength. He's got the accuracy. The things that he needs to work on is getting the ball out quicker. And I would say, quicker decision making, because with his offensive line and how good they are, he's got the talent at wide receiver, because Cedric Tillman, like I said, is going to be a bottom tier first round wide receiver. And they've got the talent around him, and he's sitting there waiting, and then waiting for somebody to get open to make the play. That's something that can be coached, but I think that those are the only things that set him apart. Bryce Young, we've already discussed what my fourth guy that I've got on this list is Will Levis. Now, a week ago when we were talking, I had Will Levis at 2 or Will Levis at 3. Him and Hendon Hooker are kind of like 1A, 1B to me, but I've got Will Levis at 4, because his stats are a little concerning to me, because when you look at what they are, he's got more interceptions than all these guys. He's got a 69.5% completion percentage, which is great, better than Bryce Young and stuff even. But he's got 13 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. That's the most interceptions out of all of these 4 guys that we've talked about. And his decision-making needs a lot of work. But like we have both discussed, he does not have the upper echelon talent like what Tennessee does, like what Alabama does, or Ohio State. So he's doing this with far less talent and putting up these numbers. But like you said, He's got a cannon of an arm. He's accurate as hell, and he can sit there in the pocket and step up and make a big play when it needs to. I am not going to sit here and say that Will Levis doesn't deserve to be on this list and doesn't deserve to be higher, but he's going to be facing Tennessee next week, so we'll see what him and Hendon Hooker can do. And also, Hendon Hooker also plays Georgia in 3 weeks from now. So if he comes out, balls out against Georgia, he is going to be probably a lock for the Heisman, and he's going to be probably the second or third quarterback taken right behind C.J. Stroud. And finally, the last guy that I have on this list, it's a wild card. You know, people wanted to say Tyler Van Dyke coming into the start of the season. They wanted to see how he was, thinking that he'd be, you know, in the upper echelon with these guys. People wanted to say Anthony Richardson. I still think that he needs to go back for one more year before he's eligible and ready to go. And even before this, like last year at the beginning of the college football season, everybody was saying Spencer Rattler, but he's been non-existent. The guy that I'm going with, Tanner McKee out of Stanford. Tanner McKee has been putting up the numbers, has been producing for Stanford each and every week, and he's been looking like the prototypical NFL quarterback. And quarterbacks out of Stanford usually don't, you know, do that well. Who was the last guy out of Stanford that actually transitioned into the NFL and did well? Wasn't that Andrew Luck?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Luck was the last Stanford great quarterback to do anything. So,
yeah. So Tanner McKee, like obviously he came out and ended up winning against Notre Dame this past week. And, you know, his stat line is not that impressive. He could use a lot of work. He's got a 64% completion percentage. He's got 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But I think that in terms of a raw prospect, he is, you know, probably the one that if you set him behind a starter now, he could be comfortable enough to start in another year or so. And then he could take that team to the next level. So right there's our top 5 quarterback prospects that we got. We'll start breaking down more film and more players for you guys each and every week. Probably next week we'll dig into the wide receivers because I know that there's a lot of teams that need wide receiver help. So next week we'll dig into that, and tomorrow we'll go over our NFL picks. We'll go over how we did this week. And Derek, I think me and you are tied this week, or you might be ahead by 1.
We're tied. So I beat you by 2 games this last week, and I got us back. So after early on, when I was like so frustrated with the 1:00 games, you were absolutely destroyed. You were beating me a little bit in the 1:00 games, but then when the 4:00 and then late night games came on, I started winning the majority of those. So I was able to regain that lead back. So yeah, you went 6-8 this last week, and then I went 8-6. Overall was not a great week for any of us, for either of us there. So, you know, can't really say too much about it since, you know, neither one of us really had a fantastic week picking games.
Right. But yeah, so that'll do it for today's episode of the Chasing Larger Sports Story podcast. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.